Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the Romantic period and some of the changes that composers make. You're going to be introduced to a whole bunch of new concepts, and don't freak out. It's a lot to take in, but yeah, it'll be useful. So in the Romantic period, Romanticism is applied to much of the music written between 1825, so towards the end of Beethoven's life, to about 1900. Most people expand that all the way up to about the end of World War I, so about 1918. So this period could be seen as little more than an extension of the classical period. We both know that's not true, but there are some conservative composers like Franz Schubert, although he's very early. His works are early. And Brahms, whose musical style is rather conservative. There was actually in the middle of the Romantic era a schism between the Romantic composers, and it was called the War of the Romantics. And so the Brahms, Schumann, Mendelssohn camp took one side, and they were considered the more conservative composers, and the Wagner, Liszt, Chopin, Berlioz, and Paganini crew took another side and became the more progressive wing of the Romantics. So what we're going to be looking at is actually a lot of what these more progressive Romantics did. Because they're the ones who got a little bit crazy with harmony and form. And so we're just going to do an overview of things that you'll see in Romantic era music. So, major things that you're going to see in the Romantic era: expanded chord vocabulary. So you're not just going to see a bunch of ones, fours, and fives. You're going to see 5 half diminished 7s of 2s, and going to a diminished 2, going to something completely, a totally different key. So they get really wild. So what you're going to see are borrowed chords, 9th, 11th, and 13th chords, Neapolitan sixths, augmented sixths, chromatic mediants, and altered dominants. All right? These were used much more frequently, all of these. And we've gone through these. I mean, these were all of the previous chapters, so this is all just preparing you for looking at and analyzing Romantic music. So, also, you're going to see modal mixture, all right? This means that the mode, i.e. major or minor, is going to get mixed up a lot. So, increasing use of borrowed chords resulting in a blending of the major and minor modes, sometimes to the point of modal ambiguity. So in this case, if we look at this piece of music, we've got minor 1 chord, major 1, minor 1, major 1, and then major 5. We can't decide until we get to this dominant, fifth, this dominant chord that's clearly a major chord. We have no idea whether to analyze this in B major or B minor. And he's purposely obscuring it. I mean, he's messing with us. Totally on purpose. So that's one example of things that you could run into. Modal ambiguity. Also, extreme modulation. So here in this Chopin prelude, we've got one measure, we're in C minor, and then we flip to A flat major, the next measure, and then we're right back to C minor, right here. So you could see, boom, 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 right? So 2 modulations in less than 3 measures. It's very common in Romantic music. So also, foreign key modulation. So composers, we always, prior to this, have always modulated to neighboring keys. Right? So you can add a sharp or take away a sharp. So if you're in the key of D, it's easy to modulate to the key of A or the key of G, or you could go to A minor or one of those neighboring keys. In the 19th century, composers would exploit the full spectrum of keys. So you're seeing a lot of keys that have like 6, 7 flats and sharps in them, but they also modulate to keys quite distant from the tonic of the composition, right? So they'll go to faraway places. These often necessitate enharmonic spellings of chords. So lots of times, and this is an example, you'll travel to the key of, C flat minor, but in reality it's, it's B minor, okay? It will be spelled B minor so that they can get away with it. So we can see this right here. So right here, this piece, this Schubert waltz, we're in the key of D. We've got a nice 1, 5. If we flip the page, we go crazy. We get this 5-7 chord in A major that can be spelled a couple of ways. So if it's a nice 5-7 chord in the key of D, we could spell it A, C sharp, E, G. But we could also potentially modulate to the key of B of D flat, because this chord also in the key of D flat, if you respell it as B double flat, D flat, F flat, G, can be considered a German sixth. So we modulate here to D flat, and then now, look at that, we're in D flat major, 1, 6, 4, 5 with an A flat 1. So you can go to some pretty crazy keys and you get away with it by doing enharmonic spellings. Also, dissonant chords, which require resolution in earlier periods, sometimes left totally unresolved. So, 5/7s, like this one, normally we would resolve the tritone, go to 1, grandpa's left totally unresolved, and then guess what? We never get our 1. We modulate and go to G minor and go to this subdominant. What the heck? So this is basically composers breaking all kinds of rules. So you don't necessarily need to, you can leave people hanging, all right? You don't have to resolve a 5/7 chord in the Romantic period. Just keep that in mind. So if we look here, what the composer has done is he's created a missing chord that our brain theoretically fills in, right? And then we continue the circle progression. So right here, there should be a 1 chord, but it doesn't exist. Our brain has to fill it in for us. Okay? So you can see it rewritten right here. So normally we would have a 2, 5/7. This would be a major 1 chord, a nice big G major chord. And then we continue our nice circle progression to a 4 chord. But we never get it. Instead, he just puts in a bar of rest. All right? Another thing that composers will do is completely non-functional harmony. And this is, notice, we're going to be analyzing a Chopin prelude as part of your homework in 13.5. So pay attention to this. Romantic composers occasionally would just abandon functional harmony for short periods. These passages were often organized around a segment of the chromatic scale. So you can see here in 13.6. Chords have been given Roman numerals, but it is clear that they are not functionally related to each other. The passage is built around a descending chromatic pattern from the tonic in the measure 5 to the dominant measure 6. So you can see it starts with a 1 chord, starts with C, and then he goes to A flat, which is theoretically sort of functional, right? And then he just keeps going, so he goes to B, up a step, down to G, up to A, it's a French 6th, back to G, back to G, right? You can see this descending scale right here. Boom, 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 boom. So it's just functioning as a chromatic descending scale. So you've got C, B, B flat, A flat, G, D. All right? And the way you deal with this is you don't have to write any of this Roman numeral stuff in. Just sort of identify the chord name and then call it linear chromatic steps until you arrive on an actual chord. Okay? We also get, as you can see, lots of chromaticism. For example, so increased use of borrowed chords and augmented sixth chords along with modal mixture cause a general increase in chromaticism in the period. Right? There's also an increase in use of chromatic non-harmonic tones, particularly chromatic appoggiaturas and passing tones. Notice the chromatic appoggiaturas in measure 10 and 12, figures 13.7. Okay, so here we can see the D to C sharp, A sharp to B, or sorry, that's an E. So you can see these little appoggiaturas that are just chromatic, meaning that they're half steps. Same with this one. So you'll see these a lot, quite often. They're totally decorative, and you don't have to count them as part of the chord. They're basically just like, treat them like a passing tone or a neighboring tone or something like that. All right, next up. Here's some more chromatic passing tones. Let's see that. So you've got F sharp to F natural, F sharp to F natural, this E to E flat, E to E flat repeated. So these guys right here, we would call chromatic passing tones. And you're going to see a lot of these in the Schubert, or in the Chopin that you're going to have to analyze in the future.